Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. Today, we're diving into the heart of energy combustion and clean technology with a pioneer in this field, Dr. Richard Axelbaum. He is the Gens Professor of Environmental Engineering Science in the Department of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering at Washington University in St. Louis. He's also the director of the Consortium for Clean Coal Utilization. For decades, he's been at the forefront of combustion science, from studying soot and pollutant formation to developing cutting-edge techniques to carry out combustion with integrated carbon capture. We'll talk about what that means later. So whether it's flame synthesizing carbon nanotubes or building better battery materials for electric vehicles, Dr. Axelbaum is helping to shape the technologies of the future. His research doesn't only stop at Earth's surface. He's also been the principal investigator of combustion experiments aboard the International Space Station. One thing I did not know that until we were doing research for this podcast. So today we're going to talk to Dr. Axelbaum about his novel research, what next steps might be, and in particular around his combustion work and the technology he's developed and why he thinks Wyoming might just be the right place to test his most advanced technology. So Professor Axelbaum, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. So
let's just start. You've studied combustion phenomena for decades. So let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into that field?
Well, I've always been interested in energy, even as an undergrad. Started my first job at General Electric, and then I left General Electric to work for a solar company. And over time with that company, I came to appreciate the limits of solar, in particular with respect to intermittency and its reliability. And so my view was to identify what I could do to help with respect to global energy. And the view of cleaning up combustion, which accounts for nearly 90% of world energy, was considered to be much more advantageous. So I really shifted into studying combustion phenomena to really see where I could have the most impact.
Great. So soot formation's been a major focus of your research. So why did you focus on that? There's a lot of different parts of combustion you could have worked on. Why soot?
Well, soot is, as you know, a major pollutant associated with combustion, or it can be.
And it can be a dangerous pollutant.
It can be. It's carcinogenic. And so if you can eliminate soot from combustion process, that could have a major impact. It's interesting, though, soot is another example of where you can have something that's potentially bad and something that is potentially good out of the same result. Soot is negative if it's in the environment, but the process of using combustion to produce carbon black is a well-established industrial technology that is effectively high-quality soot that is used for reinforcing tires. It's in our pigments and paints and the like, and so it's an industrial product that actually comes from flame synthesis of soot-like materials. So there's a lot of advantages to understanding, soot and how it can be produced or how it can be eliminated. I think one of the most interesting things about soot is when you stare at a candle, you can get an appreciation for soot in a unique way. Mm-hmm. The candle effectively glows because the process of burning the wax produces soot. And then that soot gets heated up by the flame, and when this black soot gets heated to high temperatures, it glows into the beautiful candle glow.
Okay, that's really cool. Did not know that.
And then, more important than that even, is that soot, which we are concerned about as a pollutant, when it goes through the candle, it reaches oxygen and then burns up. So we can have a candle that's illuminating the room because of soot, but then the process of the candle burns up the soot, so we have a clean environment in the end. So the candle, to some extent, represents the beauty of soot, both from its ability to illuminate, but also its ability to be eliminated.
Great. Okay, so let's get from candles to other energy technologies, or if you consider a candle an energy technology. And specifically, let's talk about oxy-combustion. This is kind of going to be the main focus of what we're going to talk about today. It's how you and I met when I was at Peabody and you were working on this, or maybe I think I met you before that, but that's when we got to work together. So first of all, let's just start. What is oxy-combustion?
So oxy-combustion, when we generally, for example, in the candle flame, the fuel is being burned with air. And the air has a fixed composition. It's 21% oxygen and the rest is basically nitrogen. Oxy-combustion says, okay, I want to combust this hydrocarbon that has carbon and hydrogen in oxygen, and I want to get rid of the CO2 that is produced in that process. So the easiest way to have a concentrated stream of CO2 is by burning carbon in oxygen, because carbon and oxygen makes CO2.
Or a hydrocarbon even.
Or a hydrocarbon, because
right.
Hydrogen and carbon make water and CO2. It's easy to get rid of the water. So oxy-combustion is a mechanism of getting a pure stream of CO2, and then that CO2 can either be utilized, for example, in EOR, or it can be sequestered.
In EOR, we mean enhanced oil recovery.
Exactly.
The act of injecting carbon dioxide, or actually other materials, but for this purpose, we're talking about carbon dioxide, into existing oil fields to help production, which is something we do here in Wyoming quite well. Mm-hmm. And we have podcasts on that. And also you can look up the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, which is part of the School of Energy Resources if you want to learn more. And your work on oxy-combustion is specifically you focused on pressurized oxy-combustion. So what does that mean and why pressurize that oxygen?
Okay, let me step back a little bit. I studied oxy-combustion from a very fundamental perspective. In fact, these experiments on the space station were studying oxy-combustion and understanding its effect on soot formation. So I began to understand how oxy-combustion actually can fundamentally affect the flame and the flame structure. And in that process, gave an appreciation for the value of oxy-combustion just from a fundamental understanding. But then the industry of oxy-combustion for carbon capture became a major part of the goals of capturing carbon. And I realized that, the potential to utilize this knowledge that we have in this field was right in front of our faces. And then the question was, well, what's the most effective way to utilize oxy-combustion? And that got us really just reevaluating the fundamental way we produce energy. And we realized is that when you think about it, so you look at a power plant, you see a white plume coming out of the top of the smokestacks. That white plume is basically water vapor that's in the stack that is condensing. And all the heat that's released when it condenses goes to heat up the atmosphere. We realize is if we pressurize the process, then just like a pressure cooker produces a hotter temperature, so if we pressurize the process, when we condense that water in the flue gas, we can actually recover that water and utilize it in the process.
So you recover the water and the energy in the water too?
Exactly.
Okay.
We cover both. So if you're an arid community, we can actually supply water. But also what we do then is we increase the efficiency of the process. And that's very important with oxy-combustion because there are costs associated with capturing carbon. But if we can develop a process where we actually get paid back for pressurizing the process to produce the carbon dioxide, then we actually have a system that's very efficient and is able to capture CO2 to have near zero emissions.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand this. So you're burning some kind of fuel. It could be biomass, coal, natural gas, something else that's a hydrocarbon, and you're doing that combustion in higher temperature and pure oxygen, and it has this benefit at the end of the power plant where you can recover energy. But also, so the way a power plant, these kind of combustion power plants work is you burn the fuel and then you transfer that heat to water that creates steam, really high pressure steam that turns the turbine that makes the electricity. So also, is anything different? Is that heat transfer, like getting the heat from the combustion to make that steam, is that also more efficient because of the atmosphere, or is all the efficiency gain at the end of the plant?
No, it's a very good point. It turns out that we don't actually burn the fuel in pure oxygen. What we do is we take the oxygen and mix it with what was the products of combustion, which is basically CO2, to dilute it. So it really burns similar to what you would have in a traditional power plant. But what you're saying is very important. The fact that we're under pressure means that our ability to capture that heat is better. The radiation through the tubes, the convective heat to the tubes, these methods of transferring heat are much more effective at high pressure. So that means what we can do, we're at higher pressure, so we make a smaller boiler, and now we have better heat transfer, even that much smaller boiler. So now what happens at pressure is we have a modular boiler that we can actually literally ship by train. And so unlike a traditional power plant, which is very large and hard to erect, timely and often exceeds the anticipated deadlines, we have something that can be factory manufactured, shipped to site, and rapidly erected on time and on budget.
Perfect. Okay, and just to clarify, so if you're burning, you said it was like similar to just burning normally that means from an oxygen concentration standpoint, but this time you have CO2 recirculating instead of nitrogen, which is what nitrogen and oxygen are most of what makes up air. Is that right?
Exactly.
So what would happen if you tried to burn it in pure oxygen?
We have actually developed technology to do that. The challenge is just that the temperature is so high with oxygen that it becomes more of a challenge to ensure that you don't melt down materials and things like that.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a great answer. So if you get interested in, there are a few different technologies that rely on oxy-combustion, and one of the they all look a little different because they're dealing with this problem in different ways. And so the way I think you've tackled it is to stage your combustion process. Is that fair?
Exactly right.
Okay.
It's more of a detail, but it ends up, we do have an additional approach that deals with that, recirculating the CO2 in an effective way that keeps our efficiency very high for this process.
That's so great. And so with that high efficiency, you're saving on fuel costs. With the modularity, you're saving on capital costs. So this is really a low-cost, innovative, new technology approach that we like to say it can be regulation-proof, right?
Exactly right. If you're looking at building a power plant and you want to make sure that plant lasts for 40 or 50 years, you want to have something that you're guaranteed no matter what happens, that plant is going to be running. And this technology, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. So the name of the technology, I don't think we've said it yet, is staged pressurized oxy-combustion, or SPOC, like Star Trek Spock. Everyone remembers that. So I think we've talked about what problems it solves. Is there anything else like high level you want to add about the technology that we haven't talked about yet?
I think, the main problem that it solves is the cost, because right now, theoretically, there are existing oxy-combustion technologies or carbon capture technologies that can capture CO2. Unfortunately, they're so high cost that there's a large resistance to doing that. And so to have a technology that can bring the cost down and do it effectively is a game changer in this industry.
Sure. And there's not very many vendors of those carbon capture technologies that you would essentially retrofit. I mean, I wouldn't see this as like necessarily directly competing with those, because the post-combustion capture technologies are add-on solutions for existing power plants, whereas this could be, generally, it could be a brownfield site, but it's basically what you would call a new power plant. And that's why we're operating the integrated test center near Gillette to see if there's any new technologies. We can get new technologies to market that could help bring down those costs for the post-combustion. But this is, at some point, if we want to continue selling coal from Wyoming, if we want to grow our gas, we're going to have to build new plants and new types of plants. And this is a technology, particularly for coal, that is going to address risk around future regulation. So if there's a consumer that would like to have a power technology that consumed Wyoming coal, that was cost competitive, that generated CO2 that could be either stored or used for enhanced oil recovery, that this is a really good option. And so it's not fully ready for commercialization yet, but you've really taken this technology quite far in terms of how far universities develop technologies. So that's what we do here at the School of Energy Resources too. So you have an incredible facility in St. Louis that I love visiting. It's really impressive. So you've been working on Spock technology for a long time. Can you talk about, during that time, what were you studying?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we had just a concept, what could be if we pressurized and ran oxy-combustion. So we really took that from a concept to now we have a small-scale pilot that's a pressurized oxy-combustion system. And we've worked out the bugs in terms of making that work effectively. One of the beauties of this technology is, often when you have a concept and you're advancing into commercialization, there's so many of these things that you didn't anticipate, didn't think about when you start off, and they often can drag down the technology. But the pressurized oxy-combustion really is the type of technology that the surprises are generally very positive. And so we've taken that concept and seen the benefits of the multiple benefits of pressurized oxy-combustion and really exploited those to develop technologies ready for commercialization.
And so, and I know you've studied, and by the way, we bring this up all the time when we talk to people, because the process of research and innovation often takes you down roads that you didn't expect to be on once you started. But that is the whole reason that we do this work, right? Is we don't know exactly where we'll end up. And in this case, it's been more positive. It's not always more positive, and that's fine, right? Some things aren't going to work. But I know you had some really cool cameras that were really high speed where you could actually measure. You understand the flame and the combustion at a really deep level. I don't want to skip over that. Is that fair?
That's fair. I think so. Apologize for the.
I know you don't. He doesn't like me. He doesn't like bragging, so I'll just do it for him, I guess, because we're not going to get too much out of you on that. But you've actually scaled up at the university setting, again, beyond what often happens at universities. So talk about that. What all have you done?
Yeah, okay. Let me mention just what you're talking about with respect to high-speed camera first, as it's related to that, this whole scale-up. Coupled with something like this, where you're talking about pressurized oxy-combustion, has never been done before. And it's complicated. You have a turbulent combustion process, and turbulent reacting flows are one of the most complicated processes that exist and difficult to understand. So we do a lot of numerical modeling using sophisticated codes to be able to model the process. But to validate those codes, we have to see what's going on in the process. So part of this was to be able to build a system, test it, understand what happens, model it, and compare the modeling results to the experiments to ensure that we actually understand it well enough that when we go to larger scale, then those models are going to guide us to be able to design the systems and make sure they work at the larger scale. So that's been a critical part of the technology development for scale-up. Unfortunately, these models do work very well, and we've been able to validate them, and now we have confidence in being able to utilize them for scale-up.
That's great, and that's one of the reasons models can be so helpful. But yeah, you absolutely have to validate them using experiments. So talk about then, you have really tall high bay rooms at Washington University in St. Louis. Talk about the big reactors in there, or reactor, and what you've done there, and how large scale are those?
Okay, this is a 20-foot tall, 3-foot diameter pressure vessel that is very unusual for a university setting.
Yeah.
And it's designed to operate we've run natural gas, we've run coal, we've run biomass on this facility. All work very well. That's one of the things about pressurization, is that the combustion process is just much, much better than it is at atmospheric pressure. If you look at our cars, our rockets, gas turbines, they're all run under pressure, and they work very well there. Our boilers are generally not, but now they can be.
So you mean by boilers are power plant boilers?
Exactly. Power plant boilers are atmospheric pressure. They're sort of an anomaly because most of combustion is at pressure.
Oh, interesting.
So now we get the ability to use that pressure. The way to think about it, imagine you have a certain amount of oxygen. If it's 15 bar, that means there's 15 times the amount of oxygen that's hitting that particle or that droplet.
That fuel particle.
Exactly. And so it just burns much more completely. Time, it gives you longer time to burn. So it gives you faster burning and longer time. And that's really what we look for in terms of ensuring complete combustion. So it's a very effective process. So we've been using that facility to be able to demonstrate that. And along with the modeling and validation, one of the critical aspects that this facility does is it allows us to run under conditions and make sure that we can operate effectively at all conditions. Another important thing for power plants that's becoming more and more important, particularly in Wyoming, is that you have intermittent power sources. You have wind and solar that come online and then go offline. And so the power plant of the future can't just be a baseload plant like it has been in the past. It has to be able to go up and down to follow the load. And so some of the things we do in this facility is we are able to vary the load and ensure we get complete, effective combustion under all conditions. And this technology, because under pressure, allows us to vary the load dramatically without really any problems with respect to incomplete combustion or emitting, for example, CO or unburned hydrocarbons. So the facility has really allowed us to demonstrate the versatility of the technology at a reasonable scale.
And I'm sorry, did you say, like, in terms of, this might not mean something to everyone, but in terms of it's 3 feet in diameter by 20 feet tall, but in terms of like heat output, it's 1 megawatt thermal?
We've been to 200 kilowatts.
200 kilowatts thermal.
Thermal.
Okay. And saying thermal just means when you have a power plant, you have to convert that thermal energy into electricity, which you're not doing.
Exactly.
So that's one of the things that hasn't occurred yet, but it is heat transfer. It's well understood. So what all challenges are left? Like, what are the steps that you would see that are necessary to be able to take this from where you are and everything you've done, decades of work, to having something at some scale that generates electricity? And then maybe also then to fully commercial scale. What has to happen? What do you have to learn? That's a huge question.
Yeah, no, it is a good question. Without getting into too many technical details, this technology is very different than a typical power plant. And it turns out that the typical questions you have in terms of scaling it up, which is really our main goal right now, they're not as relevant to this technology. You're literally just dropping the powder if it was coal, or injecting the gas in if it's natural gas, in a very controlled, smooth system. And so the challenges to scale up aren't that high, but we need to do it. And we need to do it rapidly. The demand for power is growing rapidly, and this technology can serve that demand. So the real issues we have to address are just getting up to scale. And right now what we're looking at is a 12 megawatt electric plant.
So that would be the next step.
That'd be the next step.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, the name is, we have modular technology. So we will be building one scale, and we can build the next scale and the next scale. So it works very well to scale up, because each system is a modular system that is in and of itself self-contained, but you can couple them together and make a large amount of power from the combined modules.
And I think one of the things that's interesting is, for this technology, it's not like something that is 100 times larger in terms of scale will be 100 times bigger in a lot of cases, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So it's actually the equipment, it will be bigger, but it's not going to be, like just completely ridiculously bigger than what you've already worked with.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, if you think about it, we've designed this with Doosan Babcock and EPRI to ensure we have industrial advice and guidance along the way. And we designed this for a 550 megawatt electric power plant, and those modules can be shipped by rail.
Oh,
so that's
wow.
the scale you're talking about.
Wow. Are they? Wow. That's crazy. I didn't realize that. Okay. And can we talk about the stages? So for a 550 megawatt plant, how many stages would you have?
This would be 4 stages. 4
stages. Okay. Talk about what happens in each one of those. Is there fuel going into every single stage?
Yes.
Okay.
So a little background. One of the challenges of traditional oxy-combustion, so we mentioned before, you don't want to burn pure oxygen. Oxyacetylene torch cuts through metal. That's why you have those things, if you've seen that. So you want to dilute the oxygen to keep the temperature down. And traditionally, you take the flue gas downstream and bring it back up and dilute the oxygen with basically the flue gas. But that's expensive and challenging process. And so the staging process, what we do is we just take the flue gas from the first stage and use that to dilute the second stage. So it's just a pipe goes from one stage to the next. And so that allows us to effectively keep the oxygen concentration at the level we want it to do with limited effort, and it ensures actually an efficiency gain by doing it that way as well. And so the 550 megawatt plant would be these 4 stages where the first stage feeds into the second to third to the fourth. And then you end up with an efficient process that in the end of those 4 stages, you've got effectively a stream of CO2 and water, and then you purify that to make it a pure stream of CO2. And then that can be utilized or sequestered.
Perfect. So what do you think the biggest challenges are to the future deployment and getting this scaled up?
Technologically, I don't think those are the challenges. I think
They're often not.
They're often not. It's more we have to get the resources, we have to get the interest to be able to make it happen. I believe with proper motivation, this could happen very quickly.
And by resources, part of that is getting the right funding in place,
exactly.
Right? And who will invest in something that is truly potentially game-changing and transformational, and not throwing those words around lightly, but also for the fossil sector, which hasn't had as much investment recently as historically. So, but I continue to believe, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast is that Wyoming could be a really great place. And I think you've kind of narrowed in on Wyoming as a place to undertake a large pilot of the SPOC technology. So can you talk about the reasons why you think Wyoming could be a great place to demonstrate this?
I sure can. Let me step back real quick to the mention on terms of, like you mentioned, there have been limited investment in fossil fuels. Right now is a different opportunity because the data centers are driving a rethinking of what we need to do to have reliable power. And so I believe that being able to offer data centers and utilities basically low carbon to near carbon neutral technologies that are reliable, low cost, that's what they are looking for right now. So the potential for investment is there. We have to modify the narrative to some level, but I believe we can do that. In terms of Wyoming, I think part of that is, in terms of just acceptance of this technology, probably Wyoming is the best place in the world, because I believe the Wyoming is very positive towards natural gas, towards coal. It has an enormous abundance of coal. It has abundance of natural gas. It also has biomass. It has sequestration sites and utilization with EOR as well. So the physical state of Wyoming has enormous potential to offer this technology. But also, you're here. The School of Energy Resources. This is what you do. You've experienced with scale-up. You have experience with expertise in CO2 storage and EOR. You also have a unique ability in the Bitcoin mining industry, which, interesting enough, if you look at the first small-scale systems that we're creating, we're talking about a 12-megawatt system. If I go to a utility and I say, I'm going to build you a 12-megawatt plant, they're not particularly interested. I go to a Bitcoin miner, I'm telling them I'll give you 12 megawatts of reliable power, they're very interested. So there's a lot of potential in Wyoming. And also, quite frankly, I visited you a couple of times, and I love the state.
Yeah.
We boondocked last night, and it was just fantastic.
Okay. Well, and I will say, we're here to help. This, I don't know if there's any other state that would have more to gain from a technology like this one being deployed commercially. So certainly you can count on us here at the School of Energy Resources, and also our friends over in the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation. They've been very involved in this. So we're going to keep working together and see if we can find the right opportunities to you. That's a perfect segue. I did not ask you to say the nice things about SCR. I did not ask you to make the segue, but let's go to it. So actually, we're almost out of time, believe it or not. And for our last question, we always try to ask a question that celebrates the incredible state where we're fortunate to call home And on this trip, you've spent a lot of time in Wyoming and you've been here in your camper. And when you were on the way here, I remember you asking me what's like a rustic campground and who should I talk to about that? And I was like, no, you should just find a place to camp. There's like amazing places all around the state. You should just find one of them. And here's some ideas. And I think you were really surprised, but tell me, how did the experience go finding a place to camp, and where did you end up? Is there anywhere in your experience that you would say is your favorite place?
Okay, I'm going to give you a little unusual answer.
Okay.
I want to start the experience. It's a general experience of Wyoming. So we have an RV and we had parked off campus. And I was walking back after a previous visit here and not exactly sure where I parked. And your assistant, Christy, stopped the car. She was driving by and said, "Can I help you?" And so I told the situation, so I'll drive you to your RV. So I got in the car, she drove me. And then I started talking about, we were looking for places to go. And she said, "Well, you should go boondocking. There's places real close to campus." Mm-hmm. We personally love being in an RV, but we don't enjoy being in a campsite that's just full of, parking lot type RVs. We like the open air. So we never did that before. We took her advice, and it was a wonderful experience. And we literally, just to be in the open, you have such beautiful country with so few people. Mm-hmm. That is so unique. We were in 1 hour traffic in Colorado and Denver before coming here, trying to get to the Rockies. Mm-hmm. and they're beautiful, but there's people everywhere. And here you really have just the beauty of the place, the limited number of people, and the people are like Christy that are willing to stop and give you 15 minutes of time to tell you where to go. So I think, that to me was a pretty powerful experience.
Well, she's a pretty special lady, but there are a lot of nice people in Wyoming.
I tell you, even on the elevator to here, I see it just permeates.
Yeah.
There's no doubt it permeates.
Oh, well, that's a great story. Well, don't tell your friends. We'll keep it this way. The winters are terrible. Tell everyone,
The wind.
The wind is rough, actually. Professor Axelbaum, thank you so much for all you do for us, partnering with us at the School of Energy Resources. I really hope we can help you scale up your technology to make a difference for Wyoming's energy future. And thank you for doing the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.